here on the campus. She works with the Office of Student Affairs. And after we gave birth to Rhody Outpost, it was transferred to Student Affairs ultimately, and they now oversee it. And today happens to be World Mission Sunday. Is that another aha moment for everybody? Because I didn't know that. So, World Mission Sunday. And Nancy Brown, who works with the South County Poverty and something initiative? Coalition for, anyway, asked us to please have a speaker for this Sunday on poverty in Rhode Island and here on this college campus. And so you are not going to believe what you are about to hear from Dr. Jaqui Tisdale, because she's phenomenal, and I just offer her up to you and listen with great joy.
So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I will give you a brief context because my title is long and many of you might say, I have no idea what that means. You should know that most folks on my campus don't necessarily know what that means either, okay? So my job is to be a non-academic case manager. So it means when you think about all of the things that might happen to a college student outside of them being in the classroom and the difficulties that they might have, if they need a place to come and speak with someone to help them get through that, they send them to me. That includes issues of both food and housing insecurity. So Jen stated, she talked about me as being an expert. I'm going to take that word out and say to you that Kathleen Gorman in our psychology department oversees something called the Feinstein Center for a Hunger-Free America, and has spent the last 30 years of her career and the last 20 on this campus, helping in terms of food insecurity, not only at URI, but more so across the state. So what many of you may not know, unless you had a reason to look at that information before, is that the food stamp benefit, which is called SNAP, the project for our entire state is housed on this campus. It's just on the other side of campus in a building called Tyler Hall, and the program there is unique. There's only a few others in the country. It's unique in the sense that instead of hiring a number of different individuals to go out into the community to figure out what poverty looks like in our area, the Hunger Center was able, through coursework, to give undergraduates credit and internship experiences where it is their job to go out, not only in South County, but throughout the state, and help individuals who may be eligible for food stamp benefits, who want to learn more about poverty and similar things, to learn more about that material, but more importantly, to help walk them through that process, whether they're denied, whether they're found to be eligible, and also having a better understanding of what other resources that might include for them. As we're talking about poverty, we know that that does not just mean food, it also means housing, and also means wellness. So things like, are you able to get up and feel well and healthy in the morning? Are you able to do those parts of our routine that lead to us getting ourselves out of the door in terms of being successful? Equally as important, do you have the means to get to the places that you're trying to go? So for many of our students here, and quite frankly, some of our staff, the folks that we don't necessarily see out in the open every day, they're often making considerations such as, do I go to campus today? Do I eat? Do I pay my bills? Because I can't do all of those things. I have to decide which one that I'm choosing. And so I'm very thankful to Jan and to you all as a congregation for being a major part of the Rhody Outpost inception and continuing to open your space to our community, as are our students. I will give you the example of one of our student spouses, who is a Bangladeshi woman who has been coming to the church likely since the time that the outpost began, but certainly she comes on a regular basis now and has usually cooked some delicious Bangladeshi food. She made a cake 2 weeks ago for our office. And here's the important piece of that. Our 18,000 students on campus show up in a variety of spaces, but the folks that you don't regularly see are the families that come along with them. And one space where you will see that is here. Certainly for folks who are using the food pantry, because oftentimes, especially for our graduate students, their families are the ones preparing meals, taking care of the family, trying to figure out the money while they are actively engaged in study. So you will see those students or their families show up here for the pantry and ask how else might they be able to be involved in the church. So I guess what I would encourage you all to do is you have different events and you see faces that you have not seen before and you wonder, are they a student or are they part of someone's family? Just asking the question as to how they're doing goes a long way, because you probably, unbeknownst to you, have welcomed a lot of folks from our community that otherwise would not have been seen in our spaces. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about food insecurity, and not talk to you about it in terms of the larger state of Rhode Island, but really what are we concerned about for our students in a state that is unique from others in a number of ways, and certainly why URI is different than CCRI or Rhode Island College might be, and some of those spaces. So first I offer to you the definition of food insecurity, and it simply means the following: economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate food. The words that we focus on are uncertain and adequate. We, as adults, are oftentimes able to rely on any given number of things that we consider to be certain parts of our day, right? You wake up, you know that, you have to figure out your clothes, you have to go through some sort of schedule for the day. And for many of us in this space, we aren't asking ourselves, will I have adequate food? You might be deciding, do I want what I prepared for that day, but that's different than you having adequate food. So some facts you should know: nearly 13% of US households as of 2015 are considered to be food insecure. And that translates to roughly 42 million people in our country. So I encourage you to think about that number. More concerning for those of us who work on a college campus is about 10% of those identified as being food insecure are students. So the folks that are in our community every single day. When we're talking about food security, we're considering the four following things: availability, access, stability, and utilization. And if you think about those four different concepts, what it comes to mean is, can you rely on nutritious foods being available to you on a regular basis? Are there enough of them to go around in your household? If the answer to that is no, who eats first? Okay. For the parents in the room, you know that you would always make sure that your children are fed first, and then what you have left over is what you consume. So if you think about that in terms of our parenting students, and what that means in terms of their availability to be ready to go to class, to prepare things, and to then take care of their families, there are some major concerns that come along with that. I have sent to Jan the PowerPoint presentation that I made for you today, because I know oftentimes it's helpful to go back and take a look at in writing what you hear me talking about. So what I will say to you is this: collegiate concerns across our country, in a recent survey that was done at the end of 2016, 48% of college students were considered to be food insecure in some way. So in this space where we are, that means about 9,000 of the students at the University of Rhode Island, if it translated this way, would be considered to be food insecure. So nationwide, a number of large school systems have done their own surveying to understand what food insecurity looks like in their own campuses and their communities, from California to New York to Hawaii to rural areas of Oregon. That is what has been done. And the University of Rhode Island is currently in the midst of undertaking a similar effort. We are not doing a small survey. It's a 52-item survey that, as I was sharing with folks earlier, for those of you who've had to work with any sort of research office, you will know that they are very persistent and will fine-tune things numerous times and require you to make updates. So once I have that final approval, which as I did not have as a 4:27 on Friday afternoon, but did make additional updates, the survey covers everything from not only are you hungry, but in what ways are you hungry? Okay. And here's what I mean by that. Students may have meal plans where they're able to access food during the day, or they have enough money to use a vending machine on campus during the day and perhaps get a snack. But when they go home or on the weekends, they might not have that same access. It goes back to what are the choices that I'm making? And if I make those choices, how does it impact me the rest of the way? We want to know from our students, are you grocery shopping at CVS, for example? And if so, why are you doing that? If you know you have $60 to get you through the week for food, where do you go and get that food from? Are you making a list and going to the grocery store? Or are you ordering a pizza and deciding perhaps that those 8 slices can get you through several days? So that's what I mean when we talk about in what ways are our students hungry. We have a number of students with food allergies who can't eat the food that are at a lot of the events that would offer leftovers. So for those students, that looks a little bit different. So the far-reaching impact of food insecurity, our physical health concerns, lack of nutrition and poor diet, self-esteem concerns, greater interpersonal conflict, which basically means we have students fighting more. And when I say fighting, I mean verbally as well as physically, not developing the skills that we would hope young adults would in terms of conflict resolution. How do you deal with someone that you perhaps don't get along with very well, but you need to get along with them because that's how life works? Depression, suicidality, substance use. What we know about individuals who are hungry over time is that the use of alcohol helps calm some of those hunger pangs, and that quite frankly, cheap alcohol is less costly than meal planning across the duration of a week. So for some, that is a method that they might use to get them through the week when they don't have adequate access to food. For our students, we're concerned about decreased academic achievement. So that means longer times of being here, not the traditional 4-year graduation, and considering the implications of what having to be in college for 6 or 7 or 8 years means for you financially, both in terms of the times that you're in school and the overarching impact of you entering into the workplace in a delayed way. So what are our responses to that? Certainly Rhody Outpost has been a godsend for many of our students, but what we know is that a pantry alone cannot combat or fix all of the issues that our students have, and that quite frankly, the needs of pantries across our state, across our country, vary vastly. Our students at CCRI and RIC have different needs than our students do here. Our international student population that lives in Graduate Village down the road have different needs than perhaps our 18 to 21-year-old student who lives in the main part of our campus or is commuting from their parents' home in another part of the state. So I will talk to you about the URI SNAP Outreach Project, which I mentioned earlier. And while it is the case that we are still concerned about poverty and food insecurity in the state of Rhode Island, I'm happy to report that it has been going down, although a small percent. It has gone down over the last couple of years by about 1% per year. And part of the reason for that is the SNAP Outreach Project, as well as other efforts, have been more successful in terms of getting folks who would be eligible for SNAP benefits and other benefits to go ahead and apply. So through those efforts, such as our students who are in the Outreach Project, as well as volunteers throughout the state who will go and speak to, for example, seniors or other specialty populations about the things for which they're eligible. Some of the barriers that we know will continue to exist over time is access. Folks who know that services are available but are afraid to seek resources for any number of feared repercussions. The stigma associated, transportation difficulties. Okay. It's one thing to tell someone to go fill out an application, But if they have to get on a bus to get to that office, or if where the office is isn't off of the bus line, you have to consider how are they going to get there. Okay. So when we ask the question as to are we doing enough, certainly for our students, are we doing enough for students across the state and throughout the country, we need to ask ourselves, are we providing services because they feel good for us to provide, or are we asking the right questions to make sure that we're meeting our students' needs where they are? An example of that would be, you will see food drives happen throughout the state. And oftentimes when we go shopping, we might pick up canned items, we may pick up beans. We oftentimes think about what are the foods that we would consume. We don't necessarily think about what's something that will have a long shelf life or what's something that another culture might consider to be a food staple. I will tell you, as someone who lives in Cranston, the availability of international foods closer to where I live is very different than what you will find regularly down here. The implications of that for our students who live in Graduate Village are pretty significant. And St. A's has been a really big part of pushing, for example, dry beans and other goods that our students otherwise don't have access to. So I've given you a lot of grim things to consider, some that feel a bit positive. So I will end by talking with you about the efforts that we're making at the university that feel positive and that have been impactful thus far. I've talked to you about, I don't need to talk to you more about Rhody Outpost because it's here, it's right below us, as well as the SNAP Outreach Project, as well as the survey. Dining services for the next 5 years at least will be paying for a graduate assistant. And for those who aren't familiar with grad assistants, while they only make about $17,000 a year, and I want you to think about what that means for South County rent, okay? I want you to think about that really and truly. They actually end up costing $50,000 when you consider healthcare and other things to the university. So the partnership with dining is pretty big because this new graduate student will focus predominantly on issues of food and housing insecurity, and will work with all of our community partners as well as other folks on campus to broaden awareness of concerns for our students, as well as what is the implication of this across different schools, such as RIC and CCRI, and more importantly, the same dollars that you would be donating or the same cans that you're going to go pick up, how can your reach go a little bit further? So that's what that student will be doing, and for those of you who are here for programs throughout the week, you will likely see that person beginning next year, in addition to myself. We're also working with East Farm as well as our farm on campus to make sure that the overabundance of produce that typically goes up to some of the pantries in Providence, some of that can stay a little bit more local with our students, and so introducing the concept of a farmer's market in the springtime on campus that would be free to students, and more importantly, helping our students understand what are the ways in which you can prepare the items that you've received. Because a lot of students, one, don't know how to cook. Two, perhaps they've never seen that item coming from the farm before, and they don't necessarily know what to do with it. The last two things are the state school sharing of pantry. So what that means is if we have lettuce,